What's up, everybody? Today we are tackling the Cheat Canyon. This is a classic, a real sort of jewel of East Coast kayaking. It's in West Virginia, and actually what you're seeing here is the put-in. It's a nice gravel lot. You'll notice that it's the Friends of the Cheat campground where we're putting in. That's a very important group of people and a historic moment for whitewater kayaking. Friends of the Cheat. I'll get to that later. But basically, we've got an awesome gravel parking lot. Put in is right there across the grass from the lot. We find a puppy that we get to cuddle with before we head out kayaking. This level is a little bit lower than most people love for the Cheat. And when I say a little bit, I mean just a touch under. The gauge is something around 12 feet. And when people talk about the level on the Cheat, usually they're subtracting 10 feet from that. So if it's like 12 feet, people will say it's 2 feet on the gauge. Now, when I mentioned the Friends of the Cheat, basically in 1994, illegal acid mine drainage dumping destroyed the Cheat River. There were actually two incidents, but the first one was in 94, and there was a second one soon to follow. The result was the utter destruction. I mean, the actual complete destruction of all wildlife. No water skimmers even, no little bugs, all the fish died because the acid mine drainage changes the pH balance of the river, making it uninhabitable for most life forms, including people. For a long time, when people would paddle the Cheat, they would bring sort of clean water in a water bottle to flush out their eyes after paddling because it was so bad. Since then, much like my local Potomac River, there have been aggressive measures taken by the community, both, of course, that lives all around the Cheat watershed, also paddlers who have managed to bring about legislative and funding changes where now not only is the Cheat River back, not only is the water clean, you have populations on their way to thriving in terms of the local fish and other wildlife who have returned. The hellbender, which is basically a big ol' salamander unique to the region, is back. And so it's a tremendous story of how the paddling community and the locals were able to save a watershed, not just for recreation, but of course for all the animals that depend on it to stay alive. So anyway, first rapid here is called Decision. It's a series of offset holes. And the objective is, if this one feels like too much for you, then you might make the decision to hike out because the Cheat River is in a canyon. If you're having a bad day, the best way to get home is just to finish the run rather than trying to hike out. Sorry for rambling, but worth calling out some of that history, I think. It's really cool when communities can save their local natural assets. All right, our first little bit of carnage here. As I'm making my way down the river, I can see a couple people flipping over ahead of me. So I'm like, what's going on? Is there a tricky feature here? And then I see Keith getting side surfed and something happens. We'll look from his perspective, but take a look, see what's going on here. What I'm about to see tells me to pull a stroke and get my left knee up. If I hadn't gotten my left knee up, that left to right current that I was boofing into would have flipped me over. So in the slow-mo and zoomed in here, basically what you can see is paddlers making their way up to that horizon line, seeing the sideways hole when they land. And then in this case, Keith gets stopped by it and he's side surfing. Grace in the pink helmet behind him bonks him out of the side surf, saving him and getting him out of the hole. But then she flips herself and gets stuck sort of by surprise and with no air, and she decides to pull. We recover, no big deal. She knows this river super well. This was not an issue for her. But that's the kind of traffic jam that you can come across when read and running this kind of class 3 stuff. Really quick, just to revisit why I raised my left knee. Remember, we always want to show our butt to the current so it pushes us along instead of piling up on our upstream edge and flipping us over. So when you're going over a boof and you're reading and running, typically you expect the water to be moving away from you downstream. In this case, the water over the lip was going from left to right, catching people as they landed perpendicular to the flow, maybe with their right knee up instead of their left, and either getting flipped or drawn into a side surf.
Nice, Zach!
Okay, let's see it from Keith's perspective now. Now, I think this rapid pretty much illustrates what the cheat is like. There are a few, obviously, more intense, more crowded rapids, but there is a lot of this style of connective whitewater putting together the run. I recently ran the Lower Big Sandy, the culmination of this sort of creeking adventure that I'm on. And one thing to call out is, like, a lot of times people will describe the major rapids on a river. They're really not describing the stuff that's in between those named rapids. For example, the Lower Big Sandy has, I think, 4 or 5 big named rapids, but in between each one is super continuous class 3+ read and run. And it's almost like all of that stuff combined, your ability to maintain focus and execute moves through all of the connective tissue is as important to know about the river as calling out each big rapid. So as you read new water, one thing to pay attention of, especially when you're in a canyon like the cheat is you can actually see when the river is going to make a big turn, right or left. In this case, we can see by looking at the trees that there is a big right-hand turn coming up. And a good rule of thumb when you're thinking about rivers is that turns and constrictions can reliably create rapids or some kind of excitement with the water. Also, remember that when there's a big turn, like from left to right on the river, the water is fastest and most voluminous. There's the most water going along the outside edge of that turn. So the inside edge is going to be moving more slowly. It also might be a little more shallow. That's information you can use to decide how you want to boat scout it, where you want to get out, where you want to run the rapid if you know the whole thing goes. So just FYI on that front also.
Around the corner from this rapid, there's a big eddy on River Right, and then we've got Big Nasty. All of this rubble on the bank there is the result of a landslide which pushed the bank out and then forces this water to be channelized into Big Nasty outside.
All right, so we stop here and hang out, work on our jet ferries, surfs, that kind of stuff. Big Nasty at this lower level is really more like not so nasty. So not such a big deal, not such a scary hole. Be aware that as the water comes up, Big Nasty gets nastier and nastier, stoppier and stoppier. So just take that into consideration. The level really does change the character of a lot of these features. I'm happy to say they're a little bit easier, I think, at lower water, but again, a little scrapier. So trade-offs. Classic. Lost my upstream edge and flipped trying to surf this feature, which is called Typewriter. It's a super wide wave. At lower level, it's a little bit trashier. Definitely surfs all the way across. Gets a little sticky on river left or surfers right, so just FYI. I think this next one is called Even Nastier, despite being easier and like smaller than Big Nasty. So it's also rated easier on American Whitewater. It's like a 3+, and Big Nasty is supposed to be a 4. We are reading and running this. I'm leading, so hold me accountable. Watch my read and run. How did I do here? Let me know in the comments. You know, they always talk about the GoPro effect, which effectively makes water look smaller, easier, flatter than it actually is. But the other thing that the GoPro effect does is it really diminishes the majesty of some of the views that we get. I mean, you're in this canyon, huge, tall green walls all around you, these sprays of purple flowers on either bank. It smells incredible. I mean, really, the idea that this river used to be full of acid mine runoff and be literally like rust colored the whole way through is so disgusting to think about. I'm so glad that the community was able to band together and save this piece of water.
Data is don't go left, stay away from that big rock.
Some rivers are just safer than others, more generally. Obviously, you always want to mind to safety when you're paddling. You need rescue skills. You need to be able to read water to do this sport safely. But for example, the Lower Yacht has one really big, well-known hazard, which is Dimple Rock. Aside from that, it's a pretty safe place to go hone your skills with your friends, as long as you have a roll, the right safety equipment, the basic knowledge, all of that stuff. It's a popular training ground. The Cheat is also a popular training ground, but kind of a step up from the Lower Yacht. There are more frequent hazards. There's more challenging water. So if you're going to come do this without somebody who knows the river really well, just have a really good head on your shoulders in terms of getting out and scouting, looking for signs of undercuts and sieves, that kind of thing. A good indication is if water isn't pillowing up on a rock as much as you think it might, as much as it should, there's a chance that the water is flowing under that rock, which means that you could get sucked under that rock. You can also look from downstream of a boulder, look back up and see if there's water coming out from underneath it. If there's a really weak eddy behind a rock, there's a chance that it's undercut. So just be advised when you're paddling this kind of water, don't go for random slot moves or something like that just for fun if you don't know what's on the other side of that slot or you can't boat scout it, that kind of thing. Just be smart, y'all. This is a really fun, really accessible, cool river. It is also home to Class 4 whitewater, which is just something to be aware of. All right, so the next rapid that I'm aware of that's coming up next is called Teardrop. And basically at this level, the move is to run the rapid, which kind of moves right to left with a more left bias than a right bias. Because if you're too far right, you've got a tricky move to make over or around a big pour over boulder. And I think when there's more water, it goes fine. It just goes straight over the boulder. But in this case, we wanted to keep left. Now, the trick with a long line of boaters is you don't necessarily want to follow the person right in front of you. What if they're just following too? They've never been on the Cheat. The person setting the line is ahead of them. Well, you really want to follow the person setting the line. If you can't see them because of a horizon line or whatever, yeah, you have to follow the person who's immediately in front of you. But you can imagine how that game of telephone can make a line change significantly over time. You know, one person misses the move a little, the person after them misses the move medium, the person after them misses the move a lot. And so I was earlier in the stick coming down this rapid, and then I turned around and I saw the line drifting further and further to river right, which resulted in some carnage. So that's a good thing to think about. How many people do you have who know the lines, who can lead people down? How many people are following? And does the arrangement of the rapid allow for everybody to be seeing where you're supposed to go? So would you rather send somebody first where everyone can watch and see the line do it themselves? Just a lot of different ways to handle that issue, but it's worth calling out what I'm calling the telephone game problem. This rapid, we're just reading running, I think. It's called High Falls. It's not named High Falls because it's a waterfall. It's named for a waterfall that comes into the Cheat River on River Left, like halfway up the canyon. It's very pretty, but you can barely see it in the video. See how at lower water, the rapid is kind of broken up. At the end, you've got this pool eddy thing, and you can go around the rock to exit. It's pretty forgiving at this level. All right, so remember, Cheat Canyon is a long, committing run because it's in a canyon. I think it's like 12 miles. So it's a lot of paddling. And really, I would say the most technically difficult stuff is kind of halfway to 3/4 mark. Once you do Teardrop, things are getting a bit bigger. You have High Falls to go through. You'll have Maze, which is this rapid, kind of picking your way through kind of a longer rapid. And then you've got Coliseum and Pete Morgan to close it out, which are the biggest rapids, followed by some boogie water and flat water. So general pacing of the day, enjoy Maze, this super fun rapid, sort of picking our way down. Very good experience in terms of read and run. I'm going for the boof line here on Coliseum, and I'm way too far left for the boof. See what happens.
Yeah, all good. I see what you mean.
All right, so just a couple things I want to call out really quick. The first is that I knew that I wanted to be further right than I wanted to be left. Before we left the eddy at the top of this rapid, they were really clear with me. They were like, don't go too far left. If you're going to go too far left or right, it's better to go too far right, because worst thing that happens is you get caught in the hole and then you flush, no big deal. If you go too far left, you're going to launch into a bunch of rocks, which I didn't want to happen. But you can see that my bow isn't pointing like I want to go right for a lot of this run. It's kind of back and forth and trying to adjust my position and watch where he's going. But the reality is that I should have been further right basically the whole time. Oftentimes I'm getting a lot of beta and I can't like hold it all in my head. So the thing I have to do is identify like the one or two most important pieces of beta and remember those. In this case, it was just further right than left, and I screwed it up. So this just shows you how important it is to have a plan, to know where you're going. What's your plan A? What's your plan B? And in this case, my plan B was to reach up my arm, manage the pin, and then get back into the flow, into the eddy. The thing is that that could have been a way worse pin than it was. I'm glad I got my arm up. It could have been my head. It could have been my neck. I could have been upside down. Endless, horrifying opportunity when you go too far left at that booth. So the other thing I could have done better at is when I get back into the flow, I need to raise my right knee more and lean into the rock. Make sure I don't get window shaded into those rocks as I'm trying to leave my pin. So I could have done a lot better in a lot of ways.
What are we doing? Follow? Everybody follow?
Follow Grace.
Now, I still think that if I went back and tried that line again, I could get it. But the kind of sort of silly mistake that I made leading me into those rocks shakes my confidence a bit. And it's important to note that the cheat is pretty committing. I mentioned earlier it's in the name, Cheat Canyon. So it's not roadside. It's tricky to hike out if you really need to get out. And it just highlights how important it is to make good decisions about not just which rapids to run and walk, but which ones to take more conservative lines on, like which line do you take. So now we're coming up to one of the bigger, probably the most consequential rapid, probably technically the most challenging rapid of the run, which is called Pete Morgan. It's the last sort of big rapid before it's mostly class 3 boogie water to the bridge. And at this point, I'm trying to think really hard about, like, should I run it? Should I not? I'm not really sure. So that's what I'm thinking about as I paddle my way to that next exciting point of the river. It's a tight line. You want to be just left of the bigger upstream boulders and then start charging hard left to avoid a hole at the bottom. Watch Jesse do it. Now he's charging left.
Nice. So go.
All right, before I launch into this line, which is as simple as I said, you know, you're going to come in just left of the big boulders and then charge left after the second one. I understood this a lot better when I saw it from upstream, because from the side of the rapid, those boulders look like they are stacked sort of right on the same line downstream. But the first one is further right than the second one, meaning that it naturally helps you start charging left. And that is really what made this a clear line to me. I didn't get it till I saw it from upstream. All right, closer than I wanted to be to that hole at the end, but I managed to get the tongue and get out of there on the left like I had planned.
That was crazy. Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude! Let's go, man! Woo! Yeah, nice. All right, man! Woo-hoo! Yeah, Linda! I have it in 4K for you.
All right, so after Pete Morgan, it's mostly class 3 read and run on the way out, so no other big named rapids to worry about. And for the most part, we're just going to take turns leading down to the bridge. The Jenkinsburg Bridge is the takeout, and my read and run gets a little bit lazy here coming up. You'll see what I mean. Did you see how that last hole pushed me to the right? That's what set my bow on a course to interact with that rock, which flipped me over. And I definitely could have saved it, but I was kind of chuckling, chatting, looking around. Didn't even perceive that obstacle in my way until it was too late. Things might look chill, but that's no excuse to ignore what's in front of you. Remember what I said earlier about not getting lazy? When we're all learning to read and run, there's a chance that we're going to end up stuck in a situation that we have to react to pretty quickly. Check this out. At this lower level, this situation is pretty hard for me to see from upstream. I didn't really know about it. I see the first boat go into it and I go, oh gosh, okay, got to get my bow to the right as far as I can. And this is a good example also of how there can be like an inch or two of water going over pinning rocks, especially in this kind of like triangle that the rocks are arranged in. That's kind of a classic pin setup. But as I get closer, I can see that those aren't humps of water. They're actually rocks. And quickly it became clear that I needed a good stroke on my left in order to get my bow right and clear me out of that sort of pinning area. I then get hung up on that rock a little bit and basically need to make my way back into the main flow. This is something that happens a good amount when kayaking. So just be aware, see what you can learn from this. And in this case, I was glad to have the code because it's so rounded that I didn't have any edges catch upstream current and flip me over in this kind of nasty spot. All right, some quick takeaways as we paddle out. One, the Cheat is a super fun river at this level, which is a little bit lower than usual. I was a little bit late getting to the Cheat. I was at the Cheat Mass Occurrence, a big festival at this river last year, but it was too high, so we ended up running the Cheat River Narrows. So a year too late, but finally got out there and was really stoked. The rapids are fun. There's a lot of rapid pool, kind of broken up paddling, which I like. And it runs the gamut from big water, big waves, big holes to tighter lines throughout rocks and boulder gardens, that kind of thing, which is just great practice for paddling. This is also a part of the country where there are so many things to paddle. It's right near the Savage, the Castleman, the Yacht. So there's lots to do out here, and it's very pretty. The Jenkinsburg Bridge where we take out is also where you finish up when you run the Lower Big Sandy. So it's a good place to be familiar with. The last thing is that the parking lot has a pretty tough road to get out. So I've included some footage of that. Do not bring your low, small cars, excuse me, which are not prepared for a lot of climbing, a lot of gravel, tight turns, that kind of thing.
This is like what you do for fun or whatever?